Hello, my friends. I hope you guys are having a great day. Welcome or welcome back to Trapped by Love. If you're interested in true crime and justice, you are in the right place. So I hope you consider hitting that subscribe button because we'd love to have you join us. By way of disclaimer, we discuss true crime cases involving domestic abuse and domestic homicide on this channel. So if that's not the kind of content you are looking for, I completely understand. Thanks for stopping by. For all of you who are left, let's go ahead and get into today's case. Today's case is that of Lauren McCluskey. Lauren McCluskey was born to parents Jill and Matt in Berkeley, California on the 12th of February, 1997. She also had a little brother named Ryan. When Lauren was only a year old, the family relocated to Pullman, Washington, where both her parents worked as professors at Washington State University. Jill taught economics and Matt taught physics. Lauren was said to be a very bright child, extremely active and adventurous. She loved animals and spent her time volunteering at the Whitman County Humane Society. Her role there was to help socialize cats so they'd be able to be rehomed. Lauren was a cat lover. She had 2 cats of her own named Fuzzy and Victory. She also volunteered at the YMCA for the Special Olympics. Lauren was shy with strangers, but she was a popular girl who loved being with her friends and enjoyed karaoke and dancing. She was also quite competitive, so her parents started her in athletics and track early on, and this is an area she excelled in. At her first Junior Olympic Association track meet, when she was just 8 years old, Lauren set the record in the high jump, long jump, and the 400-meter run. With that, her athletic career was off and running. She earned track and field All-American 19 times and set more records as she went. Lauren graduated from Pullman High School with honors and accepted a scholarship to Utah State University. Utah State was over 600 miles from her home, and this was unnerving for her parents. But the school boasted how safe Salt Lake City was despite the size, and the McCluskeys were won over. Lauren's parents knew their daughter was a focused, hard-working student. She'd never given them any cause for concern. She didn't party, she didn't drink, and she didn't really date much. Lauren was a devout Christian and found most boys didn't quite fit her ideas about the kind of relationship that she would want. So even though she had many friends who were male, she hadn't invested in a serious relationship. So her parents, running down the list of possible issues she could come across, they set out to remedy the only one they could foresee, which was transportation. They set out to make sure they bought her a safe and reliable car. In 2015, Lauren started college. When she met her roommate Alex, they became fast friends. In fact, everyone who came in contact with Lauren had a deep respect for her and held her in high regard. She continued to study hard and train hard. She made friends with her teammates, but was still seen as quite an introvert. She was quiet and reserved, and throughout the first few years of school, she socialized only with a very small group of friends. She was a member of the Capital Church in Salt Lake City, and she often asked her friends to come along with her and sing. However, as her senior year approached, Lauren seemed to change, and her friends say it was like it came out of nowhere. Like all of a sudden, her confidence increased tenfold. She began sharing stories of her family and friends from back home, and then she surprised a group of her friends when she rounded them up for an open mic night at a comedy club, where she got up on the stage and did a routine. Her friends were amazed at this transformation. She started going to a karaoke bar quite regularly, where she would get up on stage and sing out to a room full of strangers. She seemed to be pulling out all the stops for the last leg of her college race. She could see the end of school in sight, and she was easing up the laser focus she'd held fast to in order to stay on top of everything, on top of grades and track meets. It wouldn't be long until she'd be off on the next adventure. Then, one Saturday night in September of 2018, Lauren messaged Alex about a new bar in Main Street. They weren't planning on a big night. One drink was what they were thinking. But this night would end up being a big night. Not in terms of partying, but because this Saturday night, Lauren would meet a man that her friend Alex said she seemed to be taken with fairly instantly. Lauren met 28-year-old Sean Fields at the entrance to the bar. He was stationed there as a security guard come bouncer, and he certainly looked the part in his tight t-shirt that emphasised his muscular physique. When the girls entered, they found the bar packed and were wandering around trying to find somewhere to sit when Sean appeared and led them to some open seats. As the girls sat and talked, Sean came past to check on them a number of times. Lauren could tell that he liked her, and she was attracted to the tall man. Being quite tall herself, at 5'8", it was a nice idea to feel petite beside a man. So Alex says that Lauren, with a wave of confidence, grabbed a cocktail napkin and scribbled her phone number across it, saying to her friend if she saw the man again before they left, she would give it to him. This was so out of character for Lauren. It's not something that she'd ever done before. Sure, she'd go out with her friends and sometimes comment on a cute guy, but Alex had never seen her friend give her number to anyone before. As time passed, Sean didn't come back by where they were sitting, and when the music started drawing everyone to the dance floor, the girls decided to call it a night. As they were heading for the door, suddenly Sean was in front of them again. Alex says that he put his hands on Lauren's shoulders, holding her close, and she watched her friend thrust the napkin into his hand before she lost her nerve. Then she and Alex fled into the warm evening, giggling at her bravery all the way back to the car. The following morning, the friends met at the Capitol Church for their Sunday service, and Lauren was glowing. She told Alex that Sean had texted her and that they had plans to meet up for a date at a climbing gym later that afternoon. Lauren called her mum Jill after this first date and gushed about Sean. She told her about how he had given her roses and taken her out with his work friends. When Jill heard that Sean was 28, she was a bit concerned, but she didn't say anything. Jill knew that her daughter had always been mature for her age, so it made sense that she'd be drawn to an older guy. Immaturity was generally the reason Lauren gave for not dating the guys who were often interested in her. Jill could also hear the infatuation in her daughter's voice as she told her that Sean wasn't like the guys at her uni. He was more mature, he was from New York, and he was working part-time as a bouncer to support himself while he finished his associate degree in computer science at Salt Lake Community College. So Jill simply said, "I'm happy for you." This relationship progressed quickly, very quickly, which, again, we see time and again with these cases. This was lightning fast, though. Almost from the first date, Sean was staying in Lauren's room every night. So even though initially Alex and her other friends had been pleased for Lauren and thought the relationship was sweet, with all the flowers and formal dates and so on, pretty soon they saw through Sean's charm and recognized the signs of control emerging. Lauren began saying things within the first week of dating Sean that really worried her friends. Things like, "Sean told me to wear jeans and a t-shirt," or "Sean said I could bring some friends to the bar." Alex also tells of how Lauren got ready for dates in a panic, fearful that she would make him angry by being late. If he texted her, she rushed to respond immediately in case he got mad at her for a delayed response. She'd even have Alex reply to him for her if she was driving. So I'm waving my red flag. This is not love. This is not concern. This is not being worried or protective over you. This is control. Plain and simple. Please, if you are ever in a situation like this, just attempt to take a step back. Put some boundaries in place. A person who cares about you will respect your boundaries. Those who don't are not worth your time, so you might as well walk away now. because this behavior doesn't get better with time. It escalates. Okay, I'm hopping down from my soapbox. When Sean would call, he would often begin the conversation with a barrage of questions. Where are you? What are you doing? Who are you with? He often asked for photographic evidence of where she was and who she was with. Again, this is not acceptable behavior. If you're in a relationship and you want to shoot over a selfie of you and your friends at a coffee shop to your significant other, great, fine. But if they're demanding it, that's not okay. By all accounts, Sean was jealous and possessive. He told Lauren he didn't want her going out downtown or over to friends' houses or to any parties because there could be men there. On one occasion, when her phone died during a night class, he called her later fuming, accusing her of cheating. To protect her from the advances of other men, he bought her pepper spray and told her he was going to give her a gun. Alex tried to talk to Lauren about her relationship when Lauren brought up Sean getting her a gun. She says, quote, I kind of hinted at it, that it wasn't normal, like the controlling stuff, but I didn't want to push it, only because I knew he had a lot of control over her at that point. I knew that sometimes the guy could try to manipulate the girl and cut off communication with her friends. So that's why I didn't push it, end quote. And she's right. Alex says that there was a night early on that they went to see Sean while he was working at the bar, and when they were leaving, he was pushing for Lauren to stay up so she could come and pick him up when he finished his shift. At first it was playful, but when Lauren kept saying no because she has a life, classes and training to get up for, he got more and more demanding, and Alex was uncomfortable with the whole exchange. When Alex went to visit Lauren on the 29th of September, less than a month after she'd met Sean, she was stunned at the change in her friend. She'd lost weight, she seemed exhausted. Her eyes were glassy and hollow. She had a defeated look to her. It seemed to Alex that Sean's control and the demands he was placing on Lauren were draining her. Alex spoke with their mutual friends about her concerns. They'd all noticed that their previously independent friend was now on call for this guy. During this discussion, the friends agreed that they should go to the housing staff and alert them to the fact that not only had Sean basically moved himself into Lauren's room, but that he was talking about bringing a gun onto campus. They spoke with the university housing staff, explaining their concerns, but at this time, nothing was done. Diamond, who was Lauren's resident advisor in her dorm, was concerned, however, and she was unable to get the housing authority to take the situation seriously. In the first days of October, Lauren called her mum, Jill, in a distressed state. She explained to her mum that she'd found Sean's ID, only it had a different name on it. She was confused and had Googled the name on the ID, Melvin Rowland, and what she found was disturbing. Her boyfriend's face not only stared back at her with a different name attached, but the result of her search showed him to be 37, not 28 as he'd claimed. Yeah, so 16 years older than Lauren. This Google search also revealed that Rowland was a registered sex offender who had spent 10 years in prison after being convicted of attempted forcible sexual abuse and enticing a minor over the internet. In fact, he'd only recently been released and was on parole. Naturally, Lauren was shaken. Everything she thought she knew about this person was a lie. Her mum told her that she had to break up with this guy, and Lauren asked for advice on how to do it. She asked Alex the same thing. How do I break up with him? She was scared. Unfortunately, while Lauren was having this conversation with Alex, she was unaware that Roland was outside her ground floor window listening to all that she'd said. When she hung up the phone, she saw him peering through the window, and then he burst through the door and berated her for discussing their relationship with other people. Really, dude? That's what you're concerned about? Lauren confronted him with all his lies, his criminal history, and she ended the relationship. But Roland was not going to give up that easily. He refused to leave, and he used his physical size to intimidate and keep her in the room also. Alex has also said that he forced himself on Lauren sexually during the night. He repeatedly demanded her car keys, telling her he would go if she gave them to him, but knowing this would mean that she'd have to go through the whole ordeal again to get her car back, she kept refusing. That was until the sun started coming up, and she gave in. She gave him the keys to her car, and he finally left her room. He told her that he would leave the car in a parking lot on the far side of campus. Lauren knew that heading out there to get her car on her own was not a good idea. She called her mum, Jill, and explained all that had happened and that she was now trying to work out how to get her car back from this creep. Jill called the Utah University police and went through the situation with them. She asked if they could escort Lauren to go and retrieve her car, and they did. An officer went with her and they brought her car back without a problem. Jill was relieved and called the uni police to thank them for their help. So Lauren had her car back and now just wanted to put the whole month-long relationship fiasco behind her. But again, Roland wasn't going to make it easy. Lauren began getting messages from random numbers. These messages were written as though it was Roland's friends texting, but Lauren and her friends knew the constant stream of messages were more than likely coming from Roland himself. At first, they were messages like, "Why'd you break up with the big guy? He really loves you." What? She's known this man a month. I say it all the time. You cannot love someone in a month. And this is a 37-year-old man. The messages kept coming, and Lauren did the right thing. She didn't respond. She just ignored them, blocked them. Then the storyline coming through got more dramatic. Roland had had an accident and really needed her. He was in the hospital. Was she going to come? Then Roland died. His funeral is at such and such. Are you going to come? Lauren had seen that Roland had still been posting on his social media though, so this time she finally responded to the message with, "I know he's not dead. Stop texting me. I've contacted the police." And she did. She called the campus police and explained the situation, that this guy had lied about who he was and that he was a registered sex offender. She told them that he was harassing her. Their response was, "Has he threatened you with physical harm?" She said no, and the officers said, "Well, there's really nothing we can do. Let us know if the messages escalate." The messages did escalate. Lauren received a message threatening to post personal photos online if she didn't pay $1,000, basically blackmailing her. Lauren looked at the photos accompanying the message, and all she could think was how all she had worked so hard for was going to be tarnished in an instant. So she paid the money. She also went back to the campus police. She told them of the blackmail, and their response was, it was probably a scam. When Lauren argued that no, this was Roland, the guy who'd been stalking her, they said no, his phone was probably hacked and he was probably being blackmailed too. What? At this point, feeling like she wasn't getting anywhere with the campus police, obviously because she wasn't, Lauren reached out to the Salt Lake City Police Department. They listened to what was going on, and then following the protocol in place, they directed her back to campus police. This poor girl, she was trying so hard to get help so that she could feel safe, and no one wanted to listen. Over the following 10 days, Lauren made over 20 reports of stalking, blackmailing, and harassing behavior from Roland. She contacted Salt Lake City Police twice, and she was directed back to campus police on both occasions. She was let down by everyone who was supposed to be there to help her. On Monday, the 22nd of October, Lauren received yet another disturbing text, this time from someone claiming to be the Deputy Chief of Campus Police, asking her to go to the police station. Lauren called Campus Police, and the detective who took the call told her not to respond, that no one had contacted her, and it was probably a hoax. They didn't even look into someone claiming to be them. What is wrong with this picture? That evening of the 22nd of October at around 8:20 p.m, Lauren was on the phone with her mum as she returned home from class. She got out of her car and headed across the parking lot to her dorm building, excitedly telling Jill how well she'd done on a quiz. Jill was pleased that Lauren sounded upbeat and happy. She was relieved, hoping the Roland issue had passed. Lauren told her mum she was heading in for an early night and wrapping up the call with, "And I love you, Mum." When suddenly her tone changed. Lauren says no, obviously no longer talking to her mum. Then Jill hears Lauren's panicked screams of "no, no, no," before the line goes quiet. As Lauren walked back to her dorm, Roland had come out of the darkness and tackled her, causing her to drop her bag and phone. He wrestled the 21-year-old into the back of the vehicle he'd driven to the campus and shot her repeatedly. He then called a woman he had met on Tinder and asked her to come and pick him up, which she did. All the while, Lauren's parents were frantically calling the Utah campus police 600 miles away. They told the officer on the phone that they thought their daughter had been abducted. Jill and Matt waited by the phone, clinging to hope. But that hope was dashed when Lauren's coach called them at 9:55 to tell them the news, that their beloved daughter had been found in the back seat of a car in the parking lot, deceased. Roland and the woman who had picked him up had gone out for dinner, and they headed back to her place, where Roland asked if he could take a shower. While he was in the bathroom, this unsuspecting woman watched a news broadcast flashing her dinner date's face across her TV. She drove him to a church once he came out of the bathroom and quickly called the police to give them his location. The police went to the Trinity AME church, and as they entered, Roland shot and killed himself with the same gun he'd used to take Lauren's life. This tragedy caused an uproar as more and more information came out in the media. All the things that the authorities had failed to do to help Lauren. She did everything she could possibly do to try to get their help, and yet she was still left to fend for herself. She knew she was in danger, and the people put in place to protect her didn't. They didn't protect her. They didn't do anything to even try to make her safe. Roland was on parole. Lauren had told the campus police that he had a gun, but they didn't even look him up in the system to check his parole status. There were at least 3 things that would have violated his parole and put him back in prison had they just bothered to check. He had a gun. He was harassing Lauren, and he blackmailed and extorted money from her, not to mention impersonating a police officer. He could have been taken straight back to prison and Lauren would have been safe, but they didn't even look him up. More and more of Roland's violent past kept coming to light. An attempted sexual assault of a teen girl in 2004, a 2012 parole hearing in which he admitted to raping the teen and 2 other women. In November, the university's president, Ruth Watkins, announced that she had asked an independent investigator to look at actions taken by individual officers in the weeks before Lauren was killed. On December 19, the results of the review were released, which listed multiple significant missed opportunities to help Lauren. The report listed recommendations for increased measures and training. However, Ruth Watkins said the report about university police, quote, does not offer any reason to believe, end quote, that Lauren's slaying could have been prevented. Lauren's dad, Matt, had this to say about that. Quote, overall, the tone of the report sort of bent over backwards to be gentle on the university. But the facts themselves were very damning. They found an amazing number of failings, and then for them to say, we're going to implement all these changes, but it wouldn't have made a difference in preventing Lauren's murder, is a very convenient legal fiction and blatantly false. End quote. During this investigation, it was found that an officer who Lauren had reported the blackmail to had kept the illicit photos of Lauren and had been showing them around the new police station where he worked, as if the mishandling of this case couldn't get more disturbing. He was ultimately dismissed. The McCluskeys filed a lawsuit against the University of Utah in an effort to have them take accountability for Lauren's murder. They settled 2 years to the day after Lauren's brutal murder for $10.5 million, in addition to the schools donating $3 million to the Lauren McCluskey Foundation. The Lauren McCluskey Foundation does so many great things. I'll pop a link in the show notes or description box if you want to check it out. But here's a brief overview. This is from their website. They work with the more than 5,000 colleges and universities that receive Title IX federal funding within the United States to honour Lauren's legacy by bringing awareness to, funding research for, and providing resources to change the culture that responds poorly to dating violence and stalking on their campuses. They provide financial assistance to underprivileged high school student athletes who want to compete in sports. The foundation helps to underwrite the cost for individual equipment, travel, and entry fees for competitions. The foundation also supports special animal-related projects and animal shelters. Wow, you guys, this case is just so heartbreaking, so senseless. This young lady had so much left to do, so much to offer the world, and some entitled prick thinks he has the right to just steal her future because she spent a few weeks with him. This entire thing happened in a matter of 2 months. It's just so unfair. As always, if the content in this case has raised any concerns for you regarding your own relationship or that of a loved one, please reach out for help. There is a list of resources in the show notes and the description box below. My aim in covering these cases is to honour the victims of these crimes and to get their stories out there in the hopes of warning others who may face similar situations. The hope is the more people who recognise the red flags and warning signs of abusive relationships, the less prevalent these cases will be in the future. I thank you again for joining me this week, and until next time, please take care of yourselves and be kind to one another. Bye.